Let me tell you a story about Venerable Kumarajiva. I know there are many people who understood and know this story. However, there are actually many people who follow this live stream for the first time and haven't heard this story. Venerable Kumarajiva was an Indian monk after the Buddha passed away. He was born in 344 BC. That was before Jesus Christ was born. During that time, there were 16 countries in ancient India. His father was the son of a prime minister of one of the 16 countries, which is known as Kashmir in present day. His father would succeed his grandfather's prime minister position. However, his father did not want to be the prime minister once his grandmother passed away. The prime minister was only inferior to the king, but was above tens and thousands of people. So he asked for renunciation and left home. He wandered to the Kucha kingdom. According to Buddhist scripture, Kucha was located between India and China. It was a small kingdom, and they spoke fluent Chinese and Indian language. The emperor of this country did not have any descendants to inherit the throne. In his royal family, he had only one sister named Javaka. The king consecrated his sister as a princess, and he announced that the princess was searching for a husband. The purpose of ordaining his sister to become a princess was so that she could get married to a royal court and hopefully give birth to a crown prince. The crown prince would take over the throne to rule the kingdom. 3 months had passed, and the princess still did not meet anyone she wanted to marry. Venerable Kumarajiva was the father of Venerable Kumarajiva. On his walks for alms, he lost his way and headed to the border of China and India. At that time, the princess was living in a tall tower, and she observed all the contestants who were single prince, dukes, and counts that wanted to marry Princess Javaka. All of these contestants knew that if they were to marry the princess and bore a son, their son will be king. All they needed is another step to be chosen by the princess. So many princes, dukes, and counts gathered there to try their luck, but after 3 months have passed, the princess still didn't find anyone she liked. The princess was very good at fortune telling. The king asked why this person was handsome, this person was rich, and that person was great in academics. Why hadn't the princess find anyone she liked? The princess said that based on her fortune telling, these contestants would not have a chance to give birth to a great son. She needed a husband that would give birth to a noble son. In the king's mind, a noble son meant a son that can be a great emperor to rule his people. The king agreed with his sister and told her that she would give his throne to her noble son so that his people would enjoy happiness and live a peaceful life. The king did not know that she was also very good at Buddhism. She took refuge with a Alahat named Bangda, and he told her to follow his direction to marry a husband that had specific markings so that she would give birth to a Bodhisattva. one who would later propagate the Dharma, benefit the immeasurable being. Therefore, she followed the Alahang Badang's guidance to find her husband. As you remembered, at the time the Buddha passed away, just a few hundred years ago, there were still many Alahang. Many people cultivated and obtained enlightenment. Princess Javaka had been trying to find an ideal husband for months without success. Then on that day, the father of Venerable Kumarajiva, which was Kumarajiva, walked by the princess's tower. The princess stood on the high platform and saw him. Then the princess informed the king that the person they have been waiting for 3 months now has arrived. She asked the king to invite the Buddhist monk to come see her. The king ordered his royal soldiers to invite Venerable Kumarajiva to come and offer him a vegetarian meal. After the offering was finished, Venerable Kumarajiva gave a heartfelt Dharma talk. At the end of the Dharma talk, the princess told the Venerable that based on his knowledge and preaching about Buddhism, she wanted to ask him 3 questions. If he could answer all 3 questions correctly, the king would invite him to stay to be the chairman of the kingdom to preach about Buddhism. But if he failed, he then would have to give up his monkhood and marry the princess. Once Venerable Kumarajiva had done his Dharma talk, the prince asked him the 3 questions. The first question was how to stop the cycle of births and deaths. The Venerable responded to the princess. To escape the cycle of birth and death, one had to understand the 4 noble truths, and to practice contemplating things are impermanence, and contemplating life is suffering. From these, the individual had to find a way to escape the suffering and move toward disentanglement. The princess then asked what was nirvana. Nirvana is the realm of total extinction of desires and sufferings. And she wanted the monk to show her nirvana. Venerable Kumarajiva said, nirvana is a realm of formless and colorless. It is invisible, so it is very hard to describe. The princess asked him to give her his cassock because they were very nice. Venerable Kumarajiva asked. The cassock was given by his father, who was a prime minister of a kingdom located in ancient India on the day he entered monkhood. The princess asked Venerable if his cassock was formless or not. The Venerable Kumarajiva said that it was not formless. The princess then stated that according to Diamond Sutra, anything took form is all disillusional. She then asked him to remove his cassock because it was not formless. The Venerable couldn't say anything, so he removed his cassock. He asked him who gave him his clothes, and he said it was his mother. She then repeated her question about his clothes, whether it had a form or not. Once again, he failed to answer her debate and stripped him down to his undergarment. She told him that she would ask him the last question. She said that she understood the Diamond Sutra, and she wanted to know where would the Buddha nature be. If the monk failed to show her Buddha's nature, he then would either be stripped down completely and left the royal palace, or give up his monkhood and marry her. Venerable Kumarajiva said Buddha's nature had no appearance. How could anyone show it? The princess asked him if the Buddha nature was real or not. She further said that she had a pair of formless monk's clothes, and it was very beautiful. The Venerable asked him where these formless clothes are. The princess told him that it was in the emptiness, just like his Buddha nature was in the emptiness. She would like to give him her formless clothes. Only those who already behold Buddha's nature can see these formless clothes. The princess and her master already saw the formless clothes. Since the Venerable is a Buddhist monk, therefore, he must be able to see it as well. The Buddhist lifted her hand and pulled in the air. Venerable Kumarajiva stated that he couldn't see anything. The princess stated that her formless clothes were like his Buddha nature. They were both emptiness. She ordered him to remove all his clothes and dress up with her formless outfit. The Venerable was bewildered because he would be naked. He then gave up. The princess said that because he said that Buddha's nature is like emptiness, and it was real, because it was his Buddha nature, so only he could see it. Her formless clothes were also the emptiness, and she could see it clearly. She asked him to wear the formless clothes, because to her, the formless clothes were real. Because the Venerable said that he already saw his Buddha nature, but failed to show it, so he was not qualified to be a shaman of the kingdom, unless he agreed to wear the formless clothes from the emptiness like his Buddha nature. The princess used the words to describe the Prajna, or the transcendental knowledge. Using the words to describe transcendental knowledge doesn't help anyone to escape the cycle of birth and death, like trying to eat a cake's image. The princess stated she wanted the Venerable to live with transcendental knowledge, not only talking about it. Her knowledge about Buddhism was vast, and the Venerable did not dare to remove all his clothes and wear formless clothes. He put back his physical clothes. A Alahang Padang performed a ceremony for Venerable Kumarajiva to leave the monkhood and marry the princess. A respectful wedding ceremony was conducted. During the marriage, the Venerable was very miserable because he gave up his prime minister position and left his parents to become a monk to cultivate so that he would become a Buddha. However, his Dharma knowledge was not as good as the princess, so he had to marry her. He requested the princess that he vowed to study Dharma so he could answer her question about the formless clothes and Buddha's nature. Then she had to let him leave to become a Buddhist monk again. After having been married for 3 years, the princess got married and gave birth to a son. The prince was named Kumarajiva. Kumara was a Sherman of his father, Kumarajiva. Thap was his mother's maiden name. During her pregnancy, the princess was very good at learning Dharma. Prior to the pregnancy, she learned one and understood another. Now she learned one and understood 10 times more. The national shaman, Alahang Banda, ordered the monks in the country to chant scriptures, reciting Buddha's name and liberate trapped animals from merits day and night. They all prayed for the birth of a royal son. And the baby, Kumarajiva, came into this world in the chanting and reciting Buddha's scripture. The country was peaceful and the weather was harmonious all year round. When he was 7 years old, an LAI took him to the temple to attend the taking refuge in Buddhism ceremony. It was the first time Venerable Kumarajiva followed his parents to the temple. He was curious to see incense and smoke in the incense holder. He lifted up the oversized incense holder made out of marble, and his parents were in shock. The Princess Javaka panicked and asked him to put the incense holder down to avoid injury from the heavy marble incense holder. He put the incense holder down, and he no longer could move the incense holder. He asked LAI the reason that he couldn't move the incense holder anymore after his parents told him that it was too heavy. The national Sherma Badang told him that everything was controlled by his mind. When his mind was pure, he didn't know that the holder was heavy, so he could easily lift it up. However, because of his parents' thoughts and impurity, his mind was telling him that he could no longer lift up the heavy holder, and he would be crushed trying to lift it. Therefore, he couldn't lift it anymore. Being a crown prince, Venerable enjoyed seeing how people bow to his uncle, the king of Kucha, and his parents. During the ceremony at the temple, he saw his uncle, his parents, and himself had to bow before Buddha's statue, and even the shaman Badang. He questioned why his uncle, his parents, and he, being a crown prince, also had to bow to the Buddha. Who was the Buddha? He wanted to know if Buddha held the highest position. His mother humbly requested LAI Badang to explain after the taking refuge in Buddhism ceremony was done. The national shaman told Venerable Kumarajiva that if he wanted everybody to bow to him, then he must cultivate to become a Buddha. And at that time, he asked if he became a Buddha, whether his parents would bow to him or not. Venerable Kumarajiva and Princess Jakava answered to the crown prince that if he became a Buddha, not only would his parents had to prostrate to him, but King Kucha also had to do the same, because bowing to him is bowing to the Buddha. Due to the blessing predestined from previous life, at that moment the crown prince Kumarajiva vowed to renunciate to become a Buddha, so that his parents would also have to prostrate to him. From that moment, Crown Prince Kumarajiva refused to return back to the royal palace, and he announced that he would enter the monkhood to cultivate until he became the Buddha. The national Sherman Badang performed the ceremony to welcome the crown prince into monkhood when he was only 7 years old, so that people would prostrate to him. At that moment, his father, Venerable Kumarajiva, was sad. In the old days, he wanted to cultivate to become a Buddha to save sentient beings. When he arrived in Kucha kingdom and failed to answer the 3 questions from the princess, he gave up his monkhood to marry the princess. The prince now told him that 10 years ago he vowed if he ever understood Dharma thoroughly, he would re-enter the monkhood again. Now that his son already wanted to become a Buddha, and he still didn't want to be one, his son already surpassed him in Dharma. Venerable Kumarajiva once entered the life of physical lust and became the prince-in-law, he no longer wanted to return to the monkhood life. He told Princess Javaka that he only wanted to live as a layman. The Buddha had 4 kinds of disciples. Some practiced Buddhism at the temple, and some practiced at home. The princess stated that she married him not because of love, but because he would give her a special son that would one day become the son of Buddha. Now that their son entered Buddhist life, he had to ordain again, and she would ask his brother to behead him. Venerable Kumarajiva wiped his tears and said goodbye to the prince. LAI performed the ceremony for the Venerable Kumarajiva to hold the Buddhist monk's precepts again. From that day on, there was no further information about him. All we know is that he and Princess Jakava gave birth to a special son, and he re-entered his monkhood. Venerable Kumarajiva was born in a kingdom located between northern India and east of China. He spoke fluently those 2 languages. He studied Buddhism with his master, LAI very well. Every day he mastered 1,000 verses. His master was specialized in Hinayana Buddhism, not Mahayana Buddhism. So from 7 years old to the age of 18 years old, Venerable Kumarajiva studied all the Buddhist scriptures of the original period, including all the Balinesian sutras. One day he heard a verse of the Mahayana Buddhism. Then he asked his master why his master did not teach him this Mahayana Sutra. His master told him that he was the Prajna of Hinayana Buddhism, not Mahayana. However, with his vision, he knew Venerable Kumarajiva was predestined with Mahayana Buddhism. He would practice Mahayana Buddhism to save Chinese sentient beings, not Indian people. In China, he would be in trouble before he would preach Dharma. Would he agree to learn Mahayana even if he would be tested and even if he had to stay in jail? Venerable Kumarajiva simply responded that he vowed to save all sentient beings and forever part with misery. The national shaman was a famous preacher of the Hinayana Buddhism, and the king of Kachu asked him to be the national shaman. However, once he heard Venerable preach a verse of Mahayana Buddhism, he realized that his knowledge about the Mahayana was incomparable to the Venerable Kumarajiva. Without hesitation, he prostrated Venerable Kumarajiva and asked him to be his master. Venerable Kumarajiva declined the request because LAI was the one who shaved his hair when he was 7 years old and ordained him. He further taught Venerable for 11 years, so Venerable couldn't accept the request. LAI said that he was the master of Hinayana, but Venerable would be the master of Mahayana Buddhism. Venerable learned the Hinayana from LAI and taught Mahayana Buddhism back to him. So no one owes anyone anything. That was rightful based on the spirit of Mahayana Dharma, which wasn't high or low, and all sentient beings are equal. During that time, Venerable Kumarajiva was very famous. Everywhere he went, he was revered. He traveled to 16 countries in India to preach Dharma. his name was too famous, and eventually China heard about him. At that time, it was the Tang and Qin dynasty. The Chinese emperor sent a general named Lu Kuang to travel to India to invite Venerable Kumarajiva to come to China and preach the Buddhist sutras. Buddhism in the Tang and Qin dynasties were very prosperous. There were sutras that ordinary monks couldn't preach because of their lack of Balinese, Indian, or Sanskrit vocabularies. There were also no translators available at that time. Venerable Thong had not appeared yet. The Tripitaka Kumarajiva were excellent in both Chinese and Indian language. The general Lu Kuang from the Qin dynasty came to invite him to translate this sutra in China. However, the king of Kucha really valued his nephew like a most precious treasure because Venerable Kumarajiva could preach both Hinana and Hinana very well. So the king of Kucha did not allow him to go to China to translate the sutra. The Tang and the Qin dynasties sent General Lu Kuang and a troop of 100,000 soldiers to attack the Kucha kingdom. From ancient to present-day time, this is the only war in history that happened because of a Buddhist preacher. Normally, China and India fought because of land, territory, beautiful princesses, and or for precious treasures. The war started from Chang'an. It took General Lu Kuang 3 months to reach Kucha kingdom and another 3 months to fight with King Kucha. The king at that time was old and weak and therefore lost the war. He ceded control and let General Lu Kuang take Venerable Kumarajiva back to China to translate Buddhist scriptures. On the way back to Chanang, China, General Lu Kuang heard that his king was betrayed by a coup and has died. He hated Venerable Kumarajiva, and he said that because of this Buddhist monk, he had to travel for 3 months and fought for another 3 months. He has lost 6 months of his life and his soldiers' lives just to bring this monk back to China. Now that the king had died and the country has lost to the enemy, he decided to lead the army to India. He felt that because of this monk, the king had no armies to fight the coup of the enemies. General Lu Kuang decided not to return to his homeland. He stopped in the middle of his journey and established a new country. General Lu Kuang debated whether he should execute Venerable Kumarajiva or not. He spent 6 months to capture this monk, and 16 other countries of India also wanted this monk. Killing Venerable Kumarajiva would trigger a wave of hatred from many countries, especially Kucha. But the general did not want to release the monk either, and it was because of his personal grudge against the monk. He told his staff that he needed a legitimate excuse to kill Venerable Kumarajiva. Some of his advisors generated an idea. They suggested to let the Venerable be surrounded and live with beautiful courtesans if he was not a true holy monk, then he would break the no sexual precepts. If that happened, the general could execute the monk without worrying that other countries would condemn him for killing a holy monk. As a newly established country, he recruited all the beautiful girls who could speak Cantonese, Chaozhou, and other Chinese dialogues and made them concubines. These beautiful girls lived and served Venerable Kumarajiva. They would even bathe him. All day and night, the concubines happily sang and played music for the Venerable, while the royal guards watched closely to see if the monk would commit adultery. General Lu Kuang would have a legitimate excuse to behead the monk, and other countries would not condemn him for killing the Venerable. During that era, the Buddhist influences in India was very strong. Hucha was one of the countries like Afghanistan that were also influenced by Buddhism. There were so many Buddhist statues that were worshipped, which the Taliban recently destroyed. So General Lu Kuang did that for 10 years. However, Venerable Kumarajiva was a true holy monk. Living with the beautiful concubines, he did not make or commit any adultery. On the contrary, because of living with these concubines, he learned Mandarin, Chaozhou, Cantonese, and other Chinese languages that he would later use to benefit the Buddhist translation. During the 10 years of prison, if the nation was in distress due to, for example, a drought, Venerable Kumarajiva would perform a prayer ceremony and it would rain. When there were times of war threats, he would foresee and would use his personal power so that he could resolve the war. All distresses, such as from earthquakes, flood, or drought that had happened during that time, the Venerable used the divine power to neutralize them. As time went on, General Lu Kuang began to believe in the Venerable. One day, the general brought his troops back to his homeland, and he defeated the rebels. He reclaimed Chanang Citadel and his territory. General Lu Kuang relocated to Chanang, and he made Venerable Kumarajiva national shaman. He also appointed the Venerable to translate Buddhist scriptures to Chinese. At that time, the translated scriptures by Venerable Kumarajiva were worshipped in China. Before Venerable Kumarajiva died, he reunited with all his disciples and told them that he had translated a few thousand sutras, and they have not been published. He arranged for his disciples to burn his corpse for 3 days. After the 3 days of burning, they were to look at his tongue to see if his tongue was still intact. If his tongue remained intact, then all of his translated sutras were correctly translated. Then and only then could these sutras be published to save sentient beings. However, if after 3 days of burning and the tongue has not remained intact, but rather burned to ashes, then all his translated sutras should be burned as well. Eventually, after 3 days of cremation, and the fire went out, his disciples searched his remains and found a pile of relics and a red tongue, and it looked like a pink lotus. So all sutras translated by Triptaka Dharma Gumalatap were correctly translated in accordance with Buddha's teaching. Today, I just briefly talk about the pros and the benefits of the Diamond Sutra. I promise from here on in, I will continue to preach on my free time. In the upcoming Dharma talks, I will preach about the essence of the Diamond Sutra, which is the way to become a Buddha. In order to be a Buddha, we have to control the delusional mind and remain the true mind. It is not easy to control the delusional mind, and to remain the true mind is even more difficult. To stay in the true mind, we must first see our mind. Remember, anything that has a form is all a delusion. These are the topics that I will preach in the future. Quote, because the earthly life is a delusional vision, therefore the Pure Land is also a dream. I will further preach the reason we cultivate but have not attained enlightenment. The first important topic in the Diamond Sutra is to let go of the 4 forms, which are the forms of selfness, the form of the others, the form of sentient beings, and the form of life. Today's Dharma talk is to introduce the Diamond Sutra that was translated by Venerable Gumalatap. I deeply appreciate Venerable Thich Tien Hoa and Venerable Thich Wei Tun. Being a novice Buddhist monk who haven't obtained any Dharma, and still within us we have greed, hatred, and lust. But because I know the great benefits of the Diamond Sutra, I will share all my knowledge about the Sutra to help. If there is any merit, as the Buddha said, at the time of the decadence of Dharma, which was 500 to 2500 years after the Buddhas passed, any Buddhist monk who could preach the Diamond Sutra to open up the minds of the sentient beings, even if it is just one person, the merit from that is more than giving alms to all the sentient beings in the 3,000 great Chili Cosmo. I dedicate the merits from preaching the Diamond Sutra to all sentient beings on this planet to soon be set free from the pandemic of the coronavirus, so that all sentient beings of this Saba realm will return to normal life. Namo Gom Duk Lam Bodha. I will preach the essence of this sutra in succession. So far, my preaching has been less than 1 page of the Diamond Sutra. Therefore, this lecture can last up to several months. Respectfully yours. I cannot announce my schedule in advance. During my free time, I will sit on the preaching platform and talk about the Diamond Sutra to help sentient beings open up their minds and see their Buddha nature so that we can attain happiness in this life. We do not need to see the Buddha that possessed 32 great markings and 80 beauties, but we need to see the Buddha within. That is how we repay the Buddha in the 10 directions. That is the spirit of the Diamond Sutra. May this merit be directed towards all sentient beings on this planet be saved from the pandemic of the coronavirus. May the Buddha of the 10 directions be blessed and protect me to sit on the preaching platform and give Dharma talks that will be correct in accordance with the great Buddha, so the Diamond Sutra will continue to shine on this planet and save all sentient beings living in the Dharma ending age. Namo Bổn Sư Thích Ca Mâu Ni Phật.